Published 1730 est, the 10th of November 2017. Updated 1857 est, the 10th of November 2017. Outside, it was dark. Emily Hunt pictured could make out the familiar orange glint of streetlights through the curtains. But whose curtains? Where was she? Outside, it was dark. Emily Hunt could make out the familiar orange glint of streetlights through the curtains. But whose curtains? Where was she? Next to her on the bed was a man she didn't recognize, sitting clothed, with a TV remote in his hand, casually flipping through the channels. By now she realized she was in a hotel room. She also realized she was naked. But how she'd got there and what had happened to her was a complete blank, although she could probably hazard a guess. A sordid, nightmarish scene. Waking up with a thumping head and a complete stranger, most would gather their clothes and dash off, sheepishly, into the night, vowing never to touch a drop again. Only this wasn't like that at all. Emily is a 38-year-old highly intelligent divorcee with a 7-year-old daughter. Getting paralytic and picking up random strangers for is not something she does. She hadn't been out partying that day. She'd enjoyed a very convivial lunch with her father, who was visiting from Ireland for a few days, at their favourite restaurant in London. Her last conscious memory was finishing her meal at around 5 p.m. It was now shortly after 10 p.m. What on earth had happened? There was literally no memory there. It's like it'd been picked up and dropped next to this guy on the bed, she says. I had never seen him in my life. I was very cold and felt weird, kind of fuzzy, but it wasn't a hangover. Then I kind of realized in this light bulb moment that I must have been drugged. I got really scared. This week, Emily, who works in London, launched a crowdfunding campaign to raise £100,000 to bring her alleged rapist to justice in a private prosecution after the CPS refused to take up the case. So far, she has made £20,000. It's a case that has made headlines across the world, with water cooler theorists debating everything from her morals to her judgment. The parallels between the recent ITV drama Liar, in which a teacher tried to prove that she had been drugged and raped, were all too apparent. Yet Emily, a business strategy consultant who has worked for IBM, remains unswayed. She is neither an hysteric nor a ingenue, she insists. While freely admitting to the odd brief, ill-advised encounter with men in the past, she says she would no more make a false allegation of rape than of her glorious, thick, red hair. That terrible event 2.5 years ago was different, she says. And it is for that reason that she is resolute in her determination to bring him to court. So what did happen that day in May 2015? Emily has made it her mission to find out as much as possible. It's a quest that has driven her to a mental breakdown. She's also been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and continues to see a psychiatrist to this day. This week, Emily, who works in London, launched a crowdfunding campaign to raise £100,000 to bring her alleged rapist to justice in a private prosecution after the CPS refused to take up the case. Emily, who's originally from New York, had moved to London 12 years ago after falling in love with her former husband. The couple had divorced earlier in 2015, leaving their daughter with him. She'd met her own father for lunch that Sunday at his favourite Venetian restaurant, Bacaro, in Bethnal Green, a stone's throw from her East London home. My dad had been staying with me for the weekend. Sunday lunch at that restaurant is one of our traditions. They can last up to 9 hours, but Dad was catching his flight home and I was supposed to be going on a date that evening with a guy who's a lawyer for a bank. They ordered a bottle of Pinot Grigio and sat down to eat. Emily chose steak, so asked for a glass of red wine while her father finished the white. They ended the meal with a glass of grappa, an Italian brandy, each. The bar was crowded as it's a popular place on a Sunday, says Emily. The grappas sat on the bar for a while before the waiter brought them to our table. I've wondered if that's when the drink was spiked because my dad was late for his flight, so left me to finish a third grappa we were sharing. He doesn't even remember how he got to the airport or boarding the plane. Head had to drop by Emily's house to pick up his bags, where her ex-husband was looking after the little girl, and he remarked how uncharacteristically drunk Head seemed. "My last memory is being in the restaurant alone," says Emily. "The next thing I knew was waking up naked on a bed with a man. He was average looking. Literally the guy in the bar you don't notice." Emily has since learnt that she was captured on CCTV that evening leaving a bar called Poison, less than a mile from the restaurant and the hotel, with her alleged rapist. "The CCTV footage shows me swaying with my arms all over him," she says. "At various points I'm not able to hold myself up. I'm falling over onto a bench. I've had moments before on big nights out when things get a bit fuzzy, but I always remember the embarrassing stuff. But this time there's nothing in my memory from being at the table in the restaurant to waking up next to this guy." Emily, who's originally from New York, had moved to London 12 years ago after falling in love with her former husband. The couple had divorced earlier in 2015. Emily now knows her alleged rapist took her to the Town Hall Hotel in East London where he booked a £300 a night room. The CCTV footage in the hotel foyer shows her to be all over her companion. So much so that she knows it's one of the reasons the CPS took the decision not to prosecute. "When I finally came to, I asked him where I was. He told me. Then he asked me if I knew what his name was. I was embarrassed. I hadn't quite figured out what was happening. I hadn't hit scared yet. By then I was starting to piece it together. That's when I thought I must have been drugged. Then I got scared." Emily gathered her clothes and went to the bathroom where she called one of her closest friends. "I said there's something really wrong. I don't know who this guy is and I don't feel safe." My friend said that he'd call the police. 10 minutes later her friend texted to tell Emily the police were on the way. One of the rooms at the 5-star Town Hall Hotel in Bethnal Green, East London, where Motheraphone Muzhunt claims she was raped in May 2015. "The guy tried to smooth everything over," says Emily. "He said, 'Don't worry. Nothing happened. You just had a little too much to drink. He didn't want me to go. I remember thinking I've got to smile sweetly and get out of here.'" She took his phone number and surname to make him feel okay and managed to reach the door. As she shut it behind her, her phone rang. It was the police. "I ran down the stairs and fell into some police person's arms. I was, at that point, terrified and freaking out. They took me outside and I collapsed on the grass. I was hyperventilating. I couldn't catch my breath. I thought I was going to." The police called an ambulance and paramedics did a blood test that revealed her blood sugar levels were so low she was suffering from hypoglycemia. They fed her chocolate and took her to the Royal London Hospital. I read afterwards that 2 causes of hypoglycemia can be alcohol poisoning and GHB, the date rape drug, but the police didn't give me a urine test until shortly before 2 a.m. and the fact my blood sugar levels were so low I had to be force-fed chocolate wasn't used by the CPS in its decision-making. Doctors, fearing Emily had suffered a heart attack, gave her a scan and 2 paracetamol. At 3 a.m., following a second urine test, she was discharged from hospital and taken home. Police decided not to arrange a forensic examination as they deemed her too drunk to consent to it, and an officer from the Sapphire Rape and UAL Assault Unit arranged to come to see her the following day. There were 2 of them. They sat in my front room and were horrible. Really horrible. They were saying I'd had too much to drink and that these things happen. I was feeling utterly terrified. I kept saying I needed emotional support. I need to speak to someone. One of my friends came over and threw them out." Miss Hunt also appeared on ITV's This Morning Today, talking about what led up to the attack. By 5 p.m., having heard nothing, she gave up. "I went and showered. I was thinking hope he's telling the truth, nothing happened and everything will be fine. I had this sense of washing it all away." The following morning, Emily was at the U.S. Embassy with her daughter and ex-husband renewing their daughter's passport when she received a phone call from the police. The policewoman said, in a totally cavalier way, that the guy had admitted to but said it was consensual. "I was like, what you've just confirmed my worst fear. I need to be treated." She said, "I don't think you've got anything to worry about. We found used condoms in the room. I began shouting at her. I was utterly freaked out. There I was standing in the US Embassy with no privacy, being told by a stranger, who didn't seem to care at all, that I'd been raped. Emily went to Boots, bought herself the morning after pill and called the hospital. They told her to come straight in and referred her to an HIV unit. Can you imagine what it's like to not know what happened to your own body and to have this horrible feeling that someone else knows? In fact, quite a few people knew, but I didn't have the information. It was just horrible. Emily Hunt, 38, said she woke up naked and terrified on a hotel bed after being attacked. Emily confesses it took her a long time to tell her dad what had happened to her that night. The case was passed to the CPS. However, in July 2015 the toxicology tests revealed there was no trace of drugs in her system. More confusingly, though, the report also stated her alcohol level at the time of the alleged rape would have been about twice the legal drink-drive limit, which was not high enough to proceed with a straightforward alcohol-related consent case. It made no sense. How could I have appeared so drunk that the police said I was too intoxicated to give consent for a forensic medical examination, but only have that much alcohol in my body if I hadn't been drugged and wasn't completely trashed? Why did I have no memory of 5 hours of my life? At the point I started Googling GHB, I discovered that instead of remaining in the body for 12 hours, as the Metropolitan Police insist, it can be broken down in as little as 6 hours. What was really heartbreaking was when I discovered a hair test would have shown traces of GBH until mid-June, but we didn't get the results of the toxicology report until the end of July. Emily was on the bus commuting to work when she received what she says was a crassly insensitive email from the Met Specialist UAL Offences Unit informing her the case against her alleged rapist had been dropped. The email ended, "I'm sorry, it is not the answer you wanted. I felt the world closing in around me," says Emily. It never occurred to me they wouldn't prosecute. How could they not? I was on a bus in central London when I opened the email. I couldn't believe I lived in a world where what had happened to me wasn't prosecutable. That's when I began to fall apart, but she refused to let it drop. Last year, the Metropolitan Police finally furnished her with the details of her case after she filed for access to information. When she read its contents, she suffered a complete and total breakdown. So much so, she was admitted to hospital for 8 days. Prosecutors did not bring charges, after the woman claimed she was raped at the hotel above. Ms. Hunt, of Hackney, claims she was drugged and raped at the £300 a night hotel pictured for. Not only did Emily learn that the 35-year-old stranger she'd woken up beside had been in possession of Viagra and LSD when he was arrested, but that he had filmed her naked on his phone for more than a minute while she was unconscious. He told the police the video was for his own sordid gratification afterwards. Furthermore, he had not consumed a drop of alcohol. "I suppose there was always a part of me that thought maybe I did get completely trashed and can't remember. Perhaps we were both two drunk people making a bad decision." So to read that had no alcohol whatsoever. She breathes deeply and shakes her head. Worse was to come. A copy of the toxicology report also revealed that tests that hadn't found any suspicious drugs in her system were based, she believes, upon wrong timings. "It was that which sent me over the edge," she says. According to the report, "My last memory was at 7 p.m., but everything was a complete blank from between 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. when I finished lunch with my dad." GHB takes between 6 to 12 hours for most people to break down. The police didn't take a urine sample from me until nearly 2 a.m., so the wrong timeline made all the difference. It meant, instead of it being impossible that I'd been drugged, my body could have eliminated the GHB, particularly as I have a very fast metabolism. Reading that report was like being punched in the stomach. I wasn't eating at all and couldn't cope with anything, she says. Miss Hunt told the BBC's Victoria Derbyshire programme Today about her alleged orderly knew this guy should be in jail but had thought if they didn't have the evidence to convict him it'd have to come to terms with that. To actually discover they had so much evidence. She bites her lip. In November last year, following a meeting with the CPS after a failed appeal, Emily resolved to fund a private prosecution. 3 weeks ago, she stood in front of 50 people at a public speaking event in London and waived her anonymity to share her story. The support was overwhelming. She knows who her assailant is, and where he lives, but has been advised not to reveal it. "I went home and set up a Facebook page," she says. "I wrote, some of you know this story and some of you don't, but 2.5 years ago I was drugged and raped by a stranger. It's the beginning of the story, but this space. I tagged it Metu, but do I believe her? Would I, sitting on a jury, and presented with all the evidence, consider this man not guilty? After all, as Emily says so, they've got a man who has admitted he gets turned on by unconscious women, who's been found with Viagra, stone cold sober, filming a woman who, for whatever reason, is so out of it shes unconscious on the bed, and you're telling me there's not a reasonable chance a jury might find him guilty of rape? I must admit, I think she has a point.